Daycam. Excuse me. Peace Learning Center. Wow.
Said there are signs that say not to park on road or grass. Can be towed or ticketed. Everyone is parked in the grass. Some even buy a sign.
Prohibited, I say. Look, I've discovered the center of Earth.
Wow.
Or at least Earth.
Earth's Discovery Center. Enter here for day camp. Drop off and pick up. Pretty flowers. Oh, it's a teepee back there.
Where?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe it's not a teepee.
That green thing is just a...
Please wait here. Please wait to forward.
No. Porta potties. Hey, we need to go out and exercise, but let me smoke first.
Oh, zip lining.
Yes. I gotta lose more weight before I can do that.
No, I know that you have to. I know I have to. And skydive.
Well, that I won't be doing.
Why not?
I'm not jumping out of a
It's close to
perfectly
the same
good
thing.
airplane. It is not.
It's like in between bungee jumping and
It's
zip lining.
not. I'm not jumping out of a perfectly good airplane.
But you're being jumped out with somebody else. You're hooked up with somebody.
Okay, so we fall faster, guaranteeing that if something goes wrong, we're going to go splat.
But they have safety precautions that don't make stuff go
Which is a second chute. Did you not see the goods?
I did see the goods.
Okay.
A whole bunch of dildos. I remember we took Marcia to go see the goods. Pick up her coworkers. Hey, they liked it.
Mm-hmm.